Welcome to How to Become a Production SQL Database Administrator. My name is Raphael. In this course, the ultimate guide in becoming a SQL Server DBA, we're going to be asking the questions that most students have been asking. And so if your questions are, if you're wondering what is SQL Database Administration, or if you've wondered what is an SQL Database Administrator, or if you've wondered what it takes to become an SQL Database Administrator, or even if you've wondered what are the responsibilities of a database administrator, and finally, if you're wondering what are the rewards in becoming an SQL Database Administrator, then this course will answer some of those questions. And what is the courses you need for a successful path to becoming an SQL Database Administrator? As you can see, there's a tremendous amount of questions here, and we're going to be answering them individually throughout this course. So let me go over here and answer a couple of things here. So this course is designed for those students who have not taken any of my courses yet, or any of the SQL courses, and are interested in becoming a SQL Database Administrator. So this course will provide you with the answers and much more. We will set up a SQL environment in a virtual environment so that you actually get exposed to what the functions are of an SQL server and what an SQL server looks like. Then we'll look at some of the responsibilities of a SQL Database Administrator and all the software that is needed for the SQL Database Administration, for the VirtualBox and the operating system. We're going to be downloading, installing, configuring, deploying into a test environment, and I'll be providing you that with the links that allows you to get trial periods of those, so you don't have to purchase any of these software that you need. At the end of the course, you will have all the knowledge and the questions hopefully answered. So let's get into a little more detail of what this course is going to provide for you and how I'm setting it up to answer some of these questions that we've been talking about here. So if you're wondering what SQL administration primarily is and what a DBA does, and is it right for me, then these videos that are going to come through, and you can go through, see if this is meant for you. So let me now go to my Word, and here it is. So the ultimate guide in becoming an SQL Database Administrator. These are the individual videos that I'm going to be creating from scratch, so you get a good understanding of what an SQL database environment is and how to function within it. We're first going to be asking what is VirtualBox, and I'll answer that question with a video. And then we're going to actually create a virtual machine. We're going to download and install all the extensions for the tools that are needed for the virtual machine. And then we're going to install the operating system, Windows 2012. We're going to what's called promote this operating system to what's called a domain controller, so you understand what a domain is. Then I'm going to add what's called IP addresses to the domain. And then I'm going to create another second virtual machine that will add and join this domain. And on that particular virtual machine, I'm going to install SQL 2017. I'm going to bring down and install AdventureWorks 2014 database that you'll be working against. And then we're going to go into some of the functions of what a DBA does very briefly, such as backing up a database. And we'll go over what is the TSQL language, that's the primary language of managing SQL Server. And I'll give you a few examples of the most common language statements, such as select, where, update, delete, and a couple examples of join. At the same time, I will be providing you how to navigate through the VirtualBox here environment, because this is the environment we're going to be working against rather than your desktop. And I'll be explaining that as we go along. And then all the trial courses and the trial softwares that you need will be provided for you through various links. So there's nothing to purchase here. The virtual environment called VirtualBox is free, and we'll download and install that. Then the operating system, Windows 2012, we're going to download, and they say 180-day trial period, as is the SQL 2014. So while the VirtualBox will be free and permanent, the other two will be provided for as a download for 6 months, which is 180 days. And I'll be providing you with the links and the necessary software that you need. So for the link on the software for VirtualBox is here, and I'll be showing you how to install that. The operating system is here. The SQL server is here, and then we'll go and download and install the AdventureWorks 2012 database, so you can go there and look at it. So to address questions of what are the courses you're going to need, there are a lot of courses that I've already created. So if you go to Udemy and search for the and type in my name, Raph 𝐼𝐸𝐺, you'll get the necessary courses, and these courses are designed to make you a DBA. So if I go to my browser here, And if you go to udemy.com and type in my name, Raf, A-S-G-H-R, and click on it, you'll notice that I've already got courses that are dedicated to becoming an SQL database administrator. And they are as following. We've got Learn T-SQL, which is mandatory. We've got SQL Administration Part 1, 2, and 3. We've also got SSRS Part 1 and 2. We've also got SSIS, which is Integration System. I've also got a video dedicated to getting a job and so on. And there's other videos coming out, courses coming out that will be beneficial to you. So this is something that I would advocate you look into once you get to that stage. So here are the another question that most students have been asking is, what is the sequence that we'll be taking if I'm interested in becoming a DBA? Well, this is the sequence to take them in this order. Take Learn T-SQL first, SQL Administration Part 1, 2, and 3, followed by SQL Reporting Services Part 1, followed by SQL Server Integration Services, and then SQL Reporting Services Part 2. I have been creating at this time, it's not uploaded, which is a mock internship program Part 1 and Part 2. And I don't want to talk about that at this point, but it will be a great benefit to those who are serious about becoming an SQL. At the end of this course, and at the end of the course, taking all these courses that I've mentioned, you'll be in the market to actually start applying for junior DBAs. And if you have any questions or coupons or you need issues, then email me at my email right here, or instant message me on Udemy. So this is going to be a tremendous amount of effort that we're going to be doing together. But as I said, by the end of the course, you'll have the ultimate guide in becoming an SQL DBA, and you'll have a clear answer to all these questions regarding here. So if at the end of the course, you'll understand what SQL database administration is, what are the responsibilities of a DBA, what are the responsibilities of DBAs, and what are some of the rewards in becoming a DBA. Let me point out that the rewards for a DBA, if you do become a DBA, even as a junior DBA, are great. The starting salaries for a junior DBA are about $75,000 to $80,000, and you can certainly promote yourself to a mid-level or senior in time. So these are some of the courses that you can do, courses that you're going to need to do, which I've mentioned here. But in this particular example, as I said, we're going to start off by creating a virtual box, and then I'll create a virtual machine. Just before I get to that, let me explain what that means. As you know, if I minimize this, minimize everything here, as you know, this is your desktop or laptop. And we do not want to install at this point, for this testing purposes, we do not want to install SQL Server here, although you can. But the other thing is we want to install a operating system, Windows 2012. And your desktop or laptop may have a different operating system. So what the VirtualBox application allows you to do is create a application that within the application, you create a operating system, and then you install SQL Server on that. So it does not interfere with your desktop or laptop operating system. It's completely independent, and that's what this VirtualBox application does. In the next coming videos, I'll be showing you the various sites to how to download the VirtualBox, how to download all the various software that you need, and then we can begin. So this is going to be a great benefit to the person who wants to know how to become an SQL database DBA. I've had a lot of questions from the thousands of students that I have that are even taking the courses, but I think this will answer the questions to those students who are not my students at this point, or my future students who are coming in and trying to answer this question of what it takes to become a production SQL database administrator. So hopefully by the time you finish this video itself and taking along what I'm going to be explaining, it'll answer your questions if you have any. So I think I'll leave it here, and we'll continue with the next video of looking at the software that are needed and what is a VirtualBox. So my name is Raphael, and this is how to become a production SQL database administrator. See you in the next video. Welcome to how to become a production SQL database administrator. My name is Raphael. So we begin with asking the question, what is a VirtualBox and how to create a virtual machine? But before we can even do that, we need to download the software VirtualBox and then create a virtual machine. So let's go there. So if you scroll down to this document that will be provided for you, I want you to copy this link, which will allow you to download and install the VirtualBox. At the same time, they'll copy it and paste it here. So this is one tab that you want to do. At the same time, I want you to do the following. I want you to copy this link and paste it on a separate tab. And I want you to copy this for SQL Server 2012. Just copy this and paste it on a tab, or create a new tab like this and paste it. And finally, do this also, where we can download the AdventureWorks 2012 database that we're going to use. So copy that and on a new tab, paste it. Once you do that, you will have these 4 tabs. You will have one for, let's see what this is, one for the Windows Server operating system, one for the VirtualBox, one for SQL 2014, and finally you should have one for the sample databases. So what we're going to do in this video is primarily download these software that we need, and then we'll continue from there. So the first thing I want you to do is go to the tab for the VirtualBox. Here you'll notice that we have 2 things that we need to download. Now, as I mentioned, a VirtualBox is a free application from Oracle, and its primary purpose is to give an application where you can install and create actual operating system independent of your desktop or your laptop. And this is a great platform to test environments for operating systems without interfering in your hosting environment. So let's see how you do that. So the first thing I want you to do is download the VirtualBox extension pack. So left click this or double click it and save and go OK. It should automatically download to your downloads folder. So if I go to here on my C drive, and if I go to downloads, you'll see that it's automatically downloaded here. So yours will be by default to the downloads path. If it isn't, then make sure you understand where it is. So let's just leave that. Now that we've installed that, the next thing I want you to do is, since we're going to be installing Windows 2000 Windows operating system as opposed to Linux or Solaris or other operating systems, we need to click on this one. So click on Windows Host, and again, save the file. And again, this may take a few minutes to download, but as you can see, it's not that long, and it's not that large, 117 megabytes. So what we're going to do in this video primarily is download all the necessary applications that we need and software that we need, and then the next one will start with the VirtualBox. So this is a prerequisite of installing a VirtualBox and getting all the software ready in preparation for our thing. Preparation is essential as a DBA, and what you need to do, this will be good habits of learning. So let's do that, and let's see what will happen. Once we've installed the VirtualBox and the virtual extension for the virtual application, the next thing we're going to do is install, let's look at the application that we need. So let's go back to our, and that's done here. As you can see, if I open my downloads, we've got that downloaded. The next thing, we don't necessarily have to do it in this order, but make sure you get them all. So the next thing I want you to do is go to your SQL Server 2014. So now that you've pasted this on tab, I want you to download it. Now, do the SQL Server 2014 SP2, which is a 180 trial period, and go sign in. Now, you may have to sign in, and so let me punch in my password, and you may have to sign in here and go through this. Oops, let me see what happened here. And there we go. So you're going to have to do this. If you haven't created an account for this, you may have to create it. Now, some students have had difficulty in installing this, only a few. Now, what we need to do before I continue with this is we need to check the ISO image and register to continue. And I've already registered, but so I'm going to go through it briefly, but you may need to register it and so on. So just go all the way down and go continue. And there are a few tabs that you may have to fill out, such as your thing. And again, save this file and go OK. And again, now this may take a little while it's downloading, because as you can see, it's a large file, 3 gigs. So while that's downloading, what I want you to do now is finally go to your Try SQL operating system. And what we need to do is download that. So if you expand it by clicking the plus sign, we're going to do the same thing. Since I've registered already, we don't need to register. So this is going to be the Windows Server operating system. So again, click on the ISO, register, And once you've registered, I don't think you need to do it again, but we'll see. But as you can see, I've loaded it. I'm going to go continue. And let's see what this is. So let's go IT Pro. Let's just put virtualization. And let's see if it, and any of the data that is relevant to me is old, so don't please call me on the phone or anything. And there we go. And let's save that also. So that's going to be saving in the downloads file. Finally, what we need to do while we're here is go to this tab right here. And this will allow us to download the sample databases that we need for SQL 2014. So you can do, we may not have 2014, or so we can just do 2012. And that's fine. Or actually, there it is right here. I'm sorry. So just go to here and click on AdventureWorks 2012. And just click it. And the one we want is AdventureWorks 2000 full database zip. So click that one. And again, save. So at this point, we should have 5 separate things. We've got the Oracle extension. We've got the Oracle box. We've got the SQL Server SQL Server 2014, and then we've got the operating system, and finally the AdventureWorks 2012. And that will take some time in downloading. So what I'm going to do right now, as you can see for here, show all downloads. As you can see, it's going to take some time to download these. So what I'm going to do is pause the video here, and when it comes back, we'll start with the next video. Well, actually, I'm going to let this continue. So you should let this continue, and it may take about 20 or 30 minutes to download all this software. So once this is downloaded, what we'll continue with the next video is how to install and download the VirtualBox software, and then how to create a virtual machine so you get an idea of what that looks like. So I'm going to leave it here and let you continue. So you make sure you have all this prerequisites so we don't waste time here in understanding and redeploying it. So after you've done that, we'll continue with installing VirtualBox and creating a virtual machine. So I think I'll leave it here and we'll continue with the next video. So let's look at what we need to do. So make sure you've got all this. And as I said, I will provide you with this Word document so you don't have to go, so you can just copy paste all the necessary software that we need. So once we've done that, the next thing we'll do is on the next video, we'll answer this question: what is a VirtualBox? Although I've introduced it to some degree, and we'll actually create a virtual machine. So I'll see you then. So my name is Raphael, and this is how to become a production SQL database administrator. See you in the next video. Welcome to how to become a production SQL database administrator. My name is Raphael. So in the previous video, I asked you to download the various applications that we need. And those applications were the VirtualBox, the virtual extension, the SQL 2014, the operating system 2012, and then the database AdventureWorks 2014. So now that we've downloaded it, what we're going to do now is actually install the VirtualBox application so we can create a self-contained operating system. And once I go through the process, you'll see the idea of a self-contained virtualization. Now, virtualization obviously is used in the production environment. They certainly don't use VirtualBox, they use VMware software, but this is a great free utility to give you an idea of what virtualization does. So to begin, double-click VirtualBox, and let's start the installation of this application. And go next. Go next. We're going to basically accept all the defaults. You're going to get a warning, and that's fine. So go next, and then install. And what's going to happen now, we're going to install the VirtualBox 5.1.8 version, which I believe is the latest version of this virtualization. Virtualization has been in the market for a relatively long time. Go yes. And it's a great product that most companies use, even from small, mid-sized to large companies. And basically, it's a process where you have 1 or 2 physical servers, and on those physical servers, you have what's called virtualization software, which allows you to create self-contained operating systems. And this is what I use in the production environment in my company. And this is what the idea is behind virtualization. So let's uncheck that and go finish. As soon as you've done that, you'll see you get an icon for Oracle VirtualBox right here. So double click it, and then the application will open. And as you can see, this is the interface for the manager that you're going to get. You'll notice on the left-hand side that I've already got a virtual machine created that I did for testing, which is called DC. However, you will not see this, so yours will be blank, just like this is here. So what we're going to do now is create a virtual machine. So the first thing we want to do in creating a virtual machine is go to the left up here and go New. This virtual machine operating system will be pop up. And what we need to do is decide what type of a operating system we need to install. In our case, we are installing Microsoft Windows, but if you look at the drop down, you'll see that you can install Linux, Solaris, even Mac and other operating systems here. So for our demonstration, we're going to select Microsoft Windows. Here it allows you to select the version, and our version of Windows is a 64-bit 2012, so make sure you select the appropriate one. And here we're going to call something. We're just going to call it Windows OS. You can call it whatever you wish. So we'll just call it Windows OS. And I'm typing with one letter, one finger. So, oops, Windows. Oh, now what happened? Okay, now it's not doing. Let's just call it Windows. That's good enough. And there we go. It's a little slow, I guess. And go Next. Here it's going to ask you how much memory to allocate. Is given by default almost 2 gigs. Now take in consideration that this memory is taken away from your host server. So whatever memory you have, 2 gigs is going to be allocated to this virtual machine. Generally this is fine, so go Next. Now we're going to create the hard disk, and you have choices here. Let's just go with the default for the time being, and we can adjust the size, which is the default 25 gigs. And go create. Again, this is going to be allocated from your physical hard drive that you have in your host system. You have 3 options. Let's just go with the default and go Next. And here you have the options of dynamically allocating or fixed. I'm going to select the fixed size and go Next. And here I want to change this 25 to 35 gigs. And this will be taken from your physical hard drive also. So let's go create. The larger the size you create, the longer it takes to create the virtual machine that we're going to do. So what I'm going to do right now is click Create, and it will start the process. Now this is going to take about 5-6 minutes. So what I'm going to do is pause the video, and then when this is complete, we'll have a virtual machine here, and then we'll go over some of these options that we can for each of the virtual machines we create. So right now I'm going to pause this video while this is occurring, and we'll come back and pick it up from there. So I'll see you in a second. And we're back, and as you can see, when the virtual machine has been created, this is the interface you're going to get. And as you can see on the left-hand side, the virtual machine, Windows OS, has been created. And at the state right now, it's powered off. The first thing we need to do now is power it on. So in this particular case, what I'm going to do is just go up here and make sure you select the, obviously if you have more than one virtual machine, make sure you select the appropriate one. But for our demonstration purposes, we're only going to necessarily have one. So here in this case, let me minimize that, go Start. A window will pop up now and asking to install the operating system, which I'm going to do here. So this is how easy it was just to install the or create a virtual machine and allocate both the memory and physical space. This next window will pop up, and it's going to ask you to direct yourself to the folder where we downloaded the operating system. In this particular case, I'm going to click on this folder, left click, and a window will pop up asking for the directory where there it is. And here it is. As you can see, it's in the particular application that we've been talking about. So I'm going to left click this and go OK or Open. Now yours may be different, so make sure you find the appropriate server, but this is our data center, 64-bit, and go Start. And this will take a few minutes, as you can see. Let's close this. We can expand this, so let's expand it here. And now what's going to happen is we're going to talk about the installation of the operating system 2012. Now, it's not likely that as a DBA, you're going to be going into a company and installing the Windows server. However, it's always important to know how to do it, just in case they ask you to create a virtual machine or you need a virtual machine for a test environment, and you can create and deploy the operating system yourself. So this is the window that pops up, and it's a default page. So just go next and click on Install Now. And this will start up. The installation of our operating system has become relatively simple to do nowadays. It really has become easier and easier with only a few clicks away. So we're going to be looking at this, how to install this, and there will be a time when we need to let it run for a few minutes, and I'll pause the video. In this particular example, I want you to select we can use the standard version or the database version. It doesn't really matter for our purposes. We can choose the data center. Make sure you choose server with GUI, because this will allow us to select the GUI interface and go next. And then accept the terms and go next. Select custom install. Now it's going to ask you where do you want to install the Windows. We're going to install it in the 35 gigs that we allocated. So go next. And now it's going to start downloading Windows operating system. Now this will take about 10 to 15 minutes. It's not really that long. And then when it comes back up, it's going to look at the window for the administrator password. So I'm going to pause the video right now. And again, when this is complete, I'll pick it up. So this is how easy it is to install the operating system. And one thing to note is let me just minimize this. One thing to note is this is what I've been talking about in creation of a virtual machine. You'll notice that the background here is my desktop, and it's my Windows 10 operating system. And here is a self-contained virtual machine using the VirtualBox application. And we're about to install Windows operating system 2012. And this is a self-contained system. It will not affect this, and vice versa. We can delete this entire virtual machine and the operating system and all the applications on it, and it will not affect the background or the host, and vice versa. Anything we do here will not affect this. So this is a great way of learning a different operating system and testing operating systems if you need to, using the VirtualBox application. So as I said, so this is the reason I'm installing this, because for our purposes, when understanding SQL 2014 administration, we do need the Windows operating system, and I don't want to install the operating system on your desk and overwrite it. So this is why we're going through this process of creating a virtualization, adding the operating system, and then working with this virtual machine to do our learning of SQL. So this is going to go on for a few more minutes. So what I'm going to do right now is pause the video. And again, when this comes back, I'll pick it up and we'll continue from there. So I'm going to see you in a second. And we're back, and let me minimize this. As you can see, when the virtual machine operating system install completes, this is the next window that you're going to ask, which is asking for the administrator username password. In this particular case, make sure you use what's called a complex password. And a complex password consists of upper letters, lower cases, numbers, and some kind of a sign, either a dash or a pound sign, and so on. It's important we do that right now, because when we promote this particular operating system to what's called a domain controller, and we're adding the administrator password, it's going to make sure that the complexity of password is appropriate. If it's not, you'll get an error. So it's better to do it now than later. So make sure you add a password, again, and I'm going to call it uppercase P, ASSWORD, underscore pound sign 123. So that's mine. So you should use something similar or whatever. So password under pound sign 123 and go next and finish. And make sure you remember that password, because if you forget it, then you're gonna have to uninstall this entire VM and start from scratch. So it's important to understand that password when we log back on, which we're going to do in a few minutes. Here you can see we can expand the entire virtual machine to take over the desk if you want. And here you'll see a few things here that we'll go over in a second. The other thing to note is that if I click on there, we're looking at the manager. These are some of the properties of the VM that we're going to look at. We'll look at the general, the system, the display, and so on. in another video when I'll go over this in a little more detail, because this is going to be important to navigate the properties of this virtual machine. So right now we've installed it. It's asking to press Alt-Delete. So go to Input, Key, and Insert, and then now add the password that we just spoke of. So it's capital PASS word 123. So, and go Next. And so now we've installed the operating system Windows 2012. There's a few things we're going to have to do in terms of configuring this, and I'll show you this in a second. So I'll let this come up, and we can just kill this. One thing you'll note right now is that every time Windows Server 2012 starts, the Server Manager window is going to pop up as it does right there. And this is by default, and what we need to do is to switch this off, and I'll show you how to do that so the Server Manager window doesn't keep popping up. So let this Server Manager start. That's where we can change it. And if you'll notice, this is the environment. You'll see this scroll bar here scrolling, so it's still booting up, if you will, and setting the properties. But once that completes, what you need to do is go to Manage, left-click Manage, and you'll see a drop-down list in a second as soon as this finishes. Let's try it again. And everything here should be green. So there are some services that won't start by default, and that's okay. So let's try one more time and go Server Manager Properties, and you'll see Do Not Start Manager Automatically Log On. So check that and go OK. So now that's done, we can close this. If you need to go back to the Server Manager, this is the icon right here. Just left click it and it will start. So we will need to go to this to promote it, and we'll be doing that in the later videos. So now that we have the operating system Windows 2012 server on, you can see that it's connected to the internet, and we can access the internet. Here are a few things here, file, and we'll go over these in a few seconds. The other thing that we do need to do is, let's look at our to-do list. So create a virtual machine, we did, and now we've installed the downloaded. Now we need to install the extensions. So go back to your virtual machine, and up here in Devices, go Insert Guest Edition CD, and do that. A little window will pop up. Tap on it, and go Run. Now this is important. So make sure you do this and go Next, Install, and that's fine. Windows going to be popping up, and we want to say Always Trust, because there are several windows that are going to pop up that we need to do. So rather than doing it one at a time, just check this and go Install. And this will just take a few minutes, then it's going to reboot the virtual environment. And one thing to note is, let me minimize this, is again, look at the wonderful thing that we're doing. We're creating a separate virtual machine with an operating system that's independent of the host. So this is a great way to test these things. And this is how the real world works, actually, using a different application. They don't use VirtualBox, of course. In a production, we have VMware. So click Finish. This will reboot the virtual machine and the operating system within the virtual machine here. And that's it. We're pretty much good. We're good to go, where we're going to install the operating system, and that's it. So let that boot up. So at this point, we've done this. We've shown you what a VirtualBox is. We've created a virtual machine. We've downloaded the extensions and the tools. We've installed the operating system, and we're going to do a few properties here in a second, and I'll show you that in a second. So let's expand this and go back to Input, Keys, and let's add the password. Make sure you remember the password, very important. And there we go. And a couple of things now you can look at. Obviously, we can go up here and go to View. We can go full screen mode. And this window will pop up and go Switch. And there it is. Now, as you can see, if I scroll up here with the mouse, I can't see anything here. However, at the bottom, if I hover over, you'll see this little tab pops up. And this is where we can go View and so on. So let's go View. And we can go back to whatever we want in this case. And this particular tab here is my tab. So let's go, as you can see. So this is my desktop, and this is the virtual environment. So at this point, we've created a virtual machine. We've installed the operating system, and we're good to go. What we need to do now is, let's look at the next to-do list, is we need to promote this Windows environment, the Windows 2012, to what's called a domain controller. And the distinction between this server, which is called a standalone server, or all servers in the environment are what's called standalone, meaning there's just a self-contained operating system with a Windows server. When we talk about domain controllers, what we're doing is we're taking one particular operating system and we're promoting it to call it a domain controller. And that one is a central hub to managing the security of all the other servers and workstations within that hub. And I'll be showing you that in a second when we promote this. So I think I'm going to leave it here, and we'll continue with the next one where we're actually going to take this and, as I said, promote it to a Windows domain server, and then we'll start continuing creating a domain. So I think I'll leave it here, and that's more than enough at this point. But take the wonderful technology, which is relatively old, believe it or not, this technology is not relatively new, virtualization. And I certainly use it in my environment, and you will be certainly using it in yours. So it's a good understanding, it's a good to understand what virtualization is and be exposed to it, even in this free level. The principles are the same, but you'll be using VMsphere most likely, or whatever other applications there are that you use in the production environment. But the principle, as I said, is exactly the same, where you're creating virtual machines, putting operating systems on it, putting SQL servers on it, and then joining those into a domain. So we'll do that here. So I'll leave it here, and we'll continue with the next one where we're going to actually install SQL. We're going to actually promote this to a Windows domain, and I'll show you how to do that. So I'll leave it here, and we'll continue with the next one. So my name is Raphael, and this is how to become a production SQL database administrator. See you in the next video. Welcome to How to Become a Production SQL Database Administrator. My name is Raphael. So in the previous video, we installed Windows Operating System 2012 using a virtual machine. Now what I'm going to do to that virtual machine and the operating system is what's called promoting it to a Windows domain controller. And let's see how we do that. So let's go back to our virtual environment and expand this. At this point, this particular operating system is just what's called a standalone server. So in order to promote this, we have to go to your server manager. So left click here and open the server manager window. What we're doing now is promoting this particular server so it'll become a domain, just like Microsoft.com or Google.com. Those are domains. Now we're going to create a domain and add other servers within this domain, so this particular operating system can control and manage all the other servers and workstations within a domain. So the way to do that is left click on Add Roles and Features. That's fine. Just go Next. Now, I'm not going to go through the networking part individually. I'm just going to accept the defaults. But this is the process of adding a what's called Active Directory also. Now, it's highly unlikely that the DBA will do this. Most likely, you'll go to an existing environment where already have a domain. But again, it's always helpful to know the background of what a domain system is now is created. So go Next. It's going to select the appropriate server if there's more than one. Ours is just only one, so go Next. And what you want to do now here is right here, Active Directory Domain Services. Check that box and add the appropriate features and go Next. We want to apply this also, so select that and go Next and Finish and go Install. Now this again will take a few minutes. It's going to ask you to go through this process of making this a domain controller. And when it's finished, we'll have to promote this. At this time, it's just adding these features of domain server. The next tab that will come up is to promote it, and we'll do that in a second. So this will take a few minutes. So again, I'm going to pause this video at this point, and when this finishes, we'll come back to it. So I'll see you in a second. And we're back, and as you can see, the features have been installed. So once the features have been installed, what you need to do is hover over this and promote this to a what's called a domain controller. So left click that, and we'll start with the selection. So just look at the add a domain controller to an existing domain. We don't have one, so we have to select a new forest. And the root of the domain, now this is just like Microsoft.com, so we're going to call it SQL.com, and go next. Now you can call this domain anything you want, but for our purposes we'll just call it SQL, and go next. And it's going to take a few seconds here, but we're going to have to add a password here. So you can add the same password that you did for the administrator, but if you want to use a different one, that's fine. This will just take a couple of seconds here while this is being configured here. So as soon as that is the case, we have to install, add the password. Now, it's not important, well, not important, but it's not that critical at this point to understand the entire process of this. Is more of a network-related task that you will do. But again, it always is advantageous to know what's going on in the background in creating a domain controller. And as you can see, we're going to be installing what are called Active Directories. And this is, in a nutshell, where we control the security of our entire domain, which is SQL in this case. So I'm going to add the same password. And go next. It's going to ask about delegation of DNS. Just accept the default and go next. You can have in a production environment, a domain naming space is a separate server, but for our purposes, we're going to let this particular operating system act as the DNS also. So I'll just go next. And you'll notice once we promote this, it's ready to go. We're just going to go next. Now here at this point is if we have any issues in creating the domain controller, we have to resolve them and then rerun this process again. So if we see anything here, we have to do them. Any cautions, it's fine. But any red flags that come up, we must fix them at this point. And this is where previously, when we were not accommodating the complex password for the administrator, we got an issue here. And what I did is went back to the administrator and changed the password to a complex password. And then I didn't get this. So I'm hoping now that this will bypass that since we did it. And as you can see now, all requisites are passed. So that's fine. We get some cautions, but that's okay. So now we can install and start the process of installation of domain controllers. And again, now this is going to take a few minutes. So again, I'm going to pause this video. When this comes back, we'll start looking at the process again. So I'm going to go back to here and pause it, and we'll see you in a second. And we're back. And as you can see, when the domain controller restarts, it becomes, this is the interface. The operating system rebooted and it restarted. And now you'll notice here that we have a prefix of SQL/administrator because now it's part of a SQL domain. So we're going to add the password. And start. So now this particular operating system that was a standalone is now actually a domain controller. So this is the primary server that would act as a security for all the other servers that were to come in, and it'll manage all the other servers and workstations regarding the securities and other features, which we're not going to go into, but you'll get the idea. Here you'll notice here now, if I'm clicking on it, I'm going to click on the Windows, and you'll go to Administrator Tools here. You'll notice here I have these actual icons that I never had. One is the Active Directory of users. If I click on this, this is where I control. You can see now I've got a domain called SQL, and I have users, and I have computers, and so on. So this is where we manage the securities of users within the domain. So this is an important concept to understand now. And I'll show you that in a second. So this is now a domain controller. one thing we need to do is look at the network capabilities and add that what's called a static IP address, and that's what I'll do to the next thing. So the other thing I want you to do is, if you go to the folder here, right-click My Computer, Properties. If you wanted to know information about the Windows domain server, you can see that now. The domain is called SQL.com, and then the fully qualified name is the server name plus SQL.com. And if you wanted to change anything, this is where we can do it. So now this is a domain controller. So what does that mean in a nutshell? In a nutshell, this is what it means. Let me illustrate this quickly for you. I don't want to get into too much analysis of what a domain is, but I think this one will give you an indication of what I'm talking about. So let's make a new one first. And actually, let's just click this off so I can use this. And let me click that off also. So I'm going to take this and add this here. Imagine you have let me click this. Imagine you have a computer. This computer is a standalone server. Now imagine, I'm going to take another one. Imagine this server is a standalone computer. Now what happens is, when you have a domain, we take this particular computer and we promote it as we did, and this becomes now the domain controller. This becomes a standalone servers, and that's great. So far so good. But what happens in a domain is, let me create this. Let me fill this with something different. There we go. So this now becomes an SQL domain, and it's going to get a little complicated, but that's fine. This is an SQL domain. We'll just call it SQL. So this particular server, which we've promoted to a domain controller, controls all these servers within this circle. And this circle is called a domain. So anytime you add another computer, so let's say another computer comes in, or a workstation that's part of this SQL domain, and let's create another one. So this is another workstation or another server. Anytime it comes within this SQL domain controlled by this is now controlling all these servers and their permissions. So in a nutshell, that's the easiest way I can do it. I don't want to get into it. I have got into what are domains, and I've given this a detailed explanation of what an SQL domain is, and I encourage you to look at that when you do. But right now, this is a simplified version of what an SQL domain is. It's simply having a domain with multiple standalone servers, having one particular server promoted to a domain controller, and now this controlling the securities and other features related to these servers within that domain. So I think I'll leave it here. So now we can close that. So that's what a domain is in the simplest sense. So now that we've done that, actually, in the next video, what I'm going to do is actually allocate what's called IP addresses. This is an important concept to understand also, because every computer has what's called an IP address, or a static IP address. Just like a house has an address, each computer in the domain has to have what's called a static IP address, meaning it cannot change. So we're going to give it an IP address, and I'll show you how to do that in the next video. So I think I'll leave that here right now. So we'll continue with the next video, where we'll take this particular domain controller and assign it a static IP address. So I'll see you in the next video. So my name is Raphael, and this is how to become a production SQL database administrator. See you in the next video. Welcome to How to Become a Production SQL Database Administrator. My name is Raphael. Now that we've taken the standalone server in the previous video and created a domain controller and a domain called SQL, we're now ready to give it an IP address. So before we even start that, what is an IP address? Simply put, just like a house has a unique address, every computer in the country, actually, or in the world, has a unique IP address. And that's what we're going to assign it to. Right now, it's getting its IP address randomly. What we want it to do is create an IP address that's permanent to that specific server. So in our case of a domain controller, we're going to now give it an IP address. And let's see how you do that. So let's go to our server. You'll notice here at the bottom right here, there's no network connectivity because we don't have the appropriate network configured. So right click. And actually, before we do that, there's one thing I want you to do. I want you to go to the manager and click on the network. And from the attached to, now this is the options you have. What I want you to do is the bridged adapter. This is basically my wireless network card for my host, and that's what I want to use to connect to the internet. So go OK. Now this will save it, and what I would do at this point is restart the services, but let me see if we can restart them after that. So now you'll see here what we need to do is join the SQL domain. Right, it's not running. So right click, open network, change adapter settings, double click, properties, uncheck the 6, we're not going to be using this. Check the Internet Protocol version 4 and go to properties. As you can see, this is where we assign what's called IP addresses. So you can get an IP setting assigned automatically if your network supports this capability. Otherwise, you need to ask your network admin for the appropriate IP settings. So this can be confusing to most people, so I'll show you how to do that. Right now, I'm going to be creating an IP address using our local system. So how do I get the IP address? Well, let's look at it this way. The first thing you want to do is on your control, on your host, let me minimize all this, meaning on your computer, on your either your desktop or laptop, go and open your command prompt like this. If you don't know how to do that, just go Windows R and type in CMD and go OK, and it will pop up. I've already got a shortcut there. Right here, I want you to type in the following IP config and enter. And what we're looking for now, and remember, my computer, my physical computer here has a wireless card attached to it. So this is what I'm looking for right now. This is how I access the internet, and this is how I access all the default gateways. The default gateway is 192.168.0.1. You want to find out what your default gateway is. This is my default gateway, and this is the way I got this, is from the internet company. So when the internet company comes in, it gives you a modem and a router, and the router's address for the default gateway is this. Yours may be dissimilar. Yours may be 192.168.1.1. So if yours, whatever this is important to get and take a note of it. So what I'm going to do now is, this is the range it gives you. Usually they give you 100 range, meaning the IP address will go 192.168.0.1, and then it can go up to 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and right up to 100. So you can attach up to 100 devices using this default gateway. So this is the important thing that you need to know. So go to your main computer, your host computer, type the command prompt and get this address. So again, yours might be different. This is a very important concept to understand. So I know mine is 192.168.1. I'm going to minimize this. So what I'm going to do now is go back to my thing, and I'm going to select a following IP address. So I'm going to select 192.168. Oops, why isn't it doing it? I don't think I've got the locks, so let's try that. There you go, 192.168.0, because mine is 0, I believe. And now I'm going to assign a number to it. Now, I may have other devices already attached from 1 to 50, so I'm going to make sure and be out of that range. So I'm going to assign this particular domain controller an IP address of beginning with 50. And then I'm going to just click on this, and you'll get 255.255.255.0. Leave that is. In the default gateway, type in your default gateway. This is your default gateway, the 1. So yours may be different. So pay attention to that 192.168.0.1. That's fine. Now, in the preferred DNS, it says preferred DNS is 197. That's fine. We can leave it here. Here, I want you to redirect this to your .50. So in this case, it's 192.168.0.50. Oops. Let's get rid of that. .0.50. Yep, doing it again. 0.50. So basically the DNS, the domain naming services, will redirect itself to this domain controller and go OK. And go close. We'll just take a second. And then we're going to reboot this system also. There's a few more things we have to do that could cause an issue. One is the firewall. So anytime you're joining a domain and you get a message saying you cannot join the domain, now you'll notice that I can access the internet and I'm part of that SQL domain. Before, I didn't see SQL DOM. Now I have internet access. So that's great. And that's wonderful. Now I've changed it. And if I right-click, open networks, network adapter, double-click, properties, 4, you can see that I've got the static address here. So what we're going to do is when we create another virtual machine and another operating system, we want to join this domain, we're going to assign it a separate IP address, one increasing to this. So the next one is going to be 51. Then the next server is going to be 52, and so on. Now, we're using a 192, which is our local, but in a production company, is most likely a 10 series. So again, ask your network admin for what the IP address you should be assigned. So now we can join the, now we can access the internet. But before we do that, let's look at a couple of configurations. I want you to go to your server manager and left click it, and let's start that. And there's a couple of configurations that I need you to do. Now, if you're, well, let me look at this first. Go to your local, click on that. What I want you to do on the IE Enhanced Security, it's on. I want you to turn it off. Otherwise, you'll get pop-ups for the Internet Explorer. And you'll see that the domain firewall is on, so I want you to disable all the firewall. So left click here. Now in a production environment, you won't do this. You'll ask your network to give you an exception, but for our purpose, we're good. So now it's turned off. If you have another computer and you're trying to join the domain, and if you get the error, you cannot join the domain, it's most likely that your firewall is on. This is the reason why I want to repeat this and indicate this, because some of the students have problems and you will have problems, and this is the reason. Every time you do that, make sure you turn this off. And I'm going to close this now. And what I'm going to do now is actually restart the services or restart the VM. So it's a good idea to restart. So right click, close, and just power off, and that's fine. And that's powering off, and that's fine. So that's what we needed to do for the domain, where we're supposed to assign the static IP addresses. So let me repeat this again, because this can be confusing. When you get your internet from the internet provider, they provide you with a physical device, which is a router and a hub, as you know. In order for you to get that default gateway static IP address, this is what you need to do. Go to your command prompt and type, find where your default gateway number is. In my case, yours will be very similar. It'll be 192.168. It could be 1 here. So when you assign static IP addresses, follow this schema here and assign it. So let me close this. And let me go back to here. And now let's power it on. So let's start it. And let's see that. Make sure that the network is still on. So we want to verify that, obviously. And let's look at a full view. And I'll show you how to take this bar here and raise it and put it on the top rather than at the bottom. And then what we're going to do now is set up a few features for the virtual environment. So we're going to go over a few features in the next video, and I'll show you some of the things that you need to know and configure that will help you. One of them is going to be taking this and putting it on top And the other thing is we've looked at the bridged, so that we've done that. And we may look at some of the monitor and the other features. And another feature I'm going to show you is what's called shared folder properties. And I'll be showing you that in a second. So let this start. So as you can see, you're in a position now of understanding what a domain is, how to create a virtual machine, how to install an operating system on it, and how to do a few configuration properties, and then how to assign a static IP address. So you've done a lot in this few, let's look at this, in this few right here. So go here, keyboard, insert, and remember we're joining a domain, so password, enter. And now, long as there's, this is why you need to just go OK here, and OK. And you can see that we can see now that we have internet access, and we have the domain called SQL domain. So this particular domain controller now can access the internet with a static IP address. So that's wonderful. And we've set up all the properties. One thing I do want to check is always go to your server manager. Make sure that the properties that we set for the firewall to be turned off and the IE to be turned off took. So let's just verify that. Go to local, left click local. And now let's see, the firewall should be off, which it is. And the IE enhanced security is off. So those took, and that's wonderful. And now we have a static IP, and now we have a full functioning SQL environment domain. And what we're going to do now, let's look at the other things. What we're going to do now is I'm going to create a second virtual machine in the next one, and we're going to join this virtual machine. We're going to join this SQL domain. So every time we create a virtual machine and it wants to be a part of an SQL domain server, we can join that, and this is what we're going to do next. So I think I've created everything I wanted to know. So we're going to start the next video of creating a second virtual machine. It's going to be identical to creating the domain controller. The only thing we're going to do is not promote it to domain. However, once we do that, we are going to join the SQL domain, and the only thing we're going to do is create another IP address, a static IP address, using the same format. And then on that particular second one, we're going to start installing SQL Server and see what that is about. So I think I'll leave it here. I've given you enough to think about. So I'll leave it here. We'll continue with the next one, which is creating a next virtual machine. So my name is Raphael, and this is how to become a production SQL database administrator. See you in the next video. Welcome to how to become a production SQL database administrator. My name is Raphael. So we have configured the domain controller and did all the settings and IP address and so forth. In this video now, I'm going to actually create a second virtual machine, which is going to be very similar to what we did with the domain controller, except we're not going to promote it to a domain controller. It's going to be a standalone server. And then we're going to join the domain, the SQL domain, and I'll show you how to do that and some of the issues that you may have when doing this. So let's quickly go to our virtual machine and start this process all over again. So let's go to our server manager, and again, go to new. Now again, this is nothing going to be dissimilar that we did. We're going to select the same things that we did for the domain controller. We're going to select the appropriate version, which is 2012 64-bit. And we're just going to call this server 1. And that's good enough. And go next. Next. Now I'm going to be a little quicker on this particular case because we've already gone through this process. And as I said, it's going to be no dissimilar than what we're doing. We'll leave it at 25 gigs. That's fine. And we're going to start. And I'm going to pause this video and let this go through it because you've seen this process before. So once we get it, we'll have a separate, another instance of a virtual machine that we can configure. And then we're going to join the domain called SQL. So that's an important concept to understand. So I'm going to pause this video. And what we're going to do actually is create a second machine, add the operating system, and then I'm going to join it, and then we'll start talking about SQL Server, which were the whole idea of this short tutorials or the short course is to get to the stage where we're working with SQL Server environment. The whole reason why we're doing this entire process here of creating utilizing VirtualBox, creating a virtual machine, installing operating systems, creating a domain controller, is that so you have a platform to work with and to emulate real life production. You're not going to be installing this on your local computer, because if you install the SQL Windows operating system, it will overwrite your operating system. So we want it to be entirely separate. And this is the whole premise. And this is what we're getting to the stage where we can now install SQL and understand what SQL Server is about. So let's go back to see where we are. And it's got 1 minute. So let me just see. It seems to be going a little faster. So I may continue doing with it. Let's just see if it quickly elapses or not. So as I said, you're getting a tremendous amount of information here. What I'm encouraging you to do is, this is the ultimate guide in becoming an SQL database administrator. But note, this is just an introduction to it. I've got 8 courses, or will have 10 courses dedicated to becoming an SQL DBA, and all the courses that you will need to become that. This is just a sample. So I'm hoping you can appreciate what you'll be learning if this is just a sample when you actually take the courses. And I'll be going over those when we get to it. So let me look at the progress of this. It's almost done, so we'll just keep with it. And once this is created, what we'll have is just like here, we'll have another instance of a VM, and then we're going to configure it just like we did with the Windows operating system. At that point, I will pause it. This seems to be going a little faster than previous version because actually it was only 25 gigs as opposed to 35 gigs. And that's what I mean by the larger the hard drive you allocate, the longer it takes. That 10 gigs is saving us some time. So this is almost done. And there we go. So now we're on. So we're going to start and power it on. And we're going to go through the same process that we did just before with Windows OS. We're going to navigate to the operating system. So there it is, and go OK or open. And I'm going to start. And at this point, when we do start the installation, as you know, this is going to take a few minutes. So at this point, I will pause and come back. But as you'll notice that it's going to be virtually identical to what we did for the previous OS, Windows OS. And see, as you can see, it's identical. So at this point, you're going to become an expert at installing Windows 2012. So I'm going to pause this video right now so you know what's going to happen. At this point, it's going to install the operating system, and then we're going to get to the state where let's choose this one. Next. And you should be able to direct me to now what we're doing because it's relatively simple. And let's go to custom, select that. And as soon as this starts, I'm going to pause it. So now I am going to pause the video, and when this comes up to the page of adding the password to the administrator, we'll do that. So I'm going to pause this, and we'll see you in a second. And we're back, and as you can see, this is the setting for the password. So I'm going to use the same password for this server as I did before, not to confuse. So let's start again. Word. And like previously, make sure you remember the password if you give it a different password. So let's finish this. And as I said, it's going to be nothing dissimilar to what you've seen before when we created the domain controller. It's virtually identical at this point. And all I'm going to do to this one now is just change a few configurations, like the firewall setting, give it an IP address, and that's it. And then what the next thing we're going to do is start installing, we're going to join this domain. We're going to join the domain. Once we join the domain and it's part of SQL domain, this standalone server will now host the SQL 2014. And I'm going to show you how to install the SQL server on this particular machine. So let's just look at this while this doing this. And let's look at so right now we're doing this, and we're going to be joining a domain. And I'm going to go over this a little more in detail because If you do have an issue of joining the domain, I'm going to show you some of the reasons you may be having difficulty in joining the domain and how to resolve those. So this is going to be an important concept to understand when you're creating a second server and joining it. So there it is. So let's go to Input, Keyboard, and let's join. And right now you can see it's not part of the SQL because there's no SQL /. This is still a standalone server. So the first thing we need to do in order to get part of it is join it. So let's start. And let's go 1, 2, 3. And let's look at our view, the whole thing here. And go switch. And just like the other server, we're going to have to change some properties here. And I'll point out a couple of things here. As you can see, the network internet access, but it's not part of SQL. It's a standalone. We're going to get the SQL manager popping up, so we're going to have to resolve that also, just like we did before. So there's a few things we need to do to this particular instance also. So let's look at what they are. So let's go to our local. Well, let's just look at this. Let's change the pop-up so we don't get the pop-up. Left click. And it should take a second for the drop-down list. So we don't and go to server properties. And the great thing is that as you do this redundantly with the other servers, if you wanted to add another server, you would do exactly the same thing we've been doing with this one and just repeat the process. So now go to local and go to firewall, and it's on, so turn it off. Now I'm going to turn this off, and go OK. Same thing, this is off as you can see. Same thing with the IE. I'm going to turn it off and go OK. Now this is one of the reasons where some of the students had issues here, and we're going to go close this. And right now you can see we can access the internet, but it's not part of the SQL server, SQL domain. So what we need to do now is join the domain. So the way you do that is right click here. Now, one thing I want you to note is that I did turn off the firewall, and we're going to join the domain. So if we have an issue, it could be the firewall is disabled again when we join the domain. So that's one thing I want you to note, and that's why I'm deliberately pointing it out. So one thing it is that I want you to join the domain, and the way to do that now is as follows. Go to your folder here, right click, properties, and as you can see, it's part of the workstation. It's not part of the domain. So in order to join the domain, you're going to go settings, change, domain, and now we're going to go SQL because that's our domain name. Go OK. And a Windows server should pop up. Oops, let's call it .com. Well, let's join the static IP addresses first before we do that. So it knows how to resolve those DNS. So what I want you to do actually is a couple of things here. So the first thing I want you to do is actually, let's look at this. Let's go to View, Full Scale. Let's go back to our manager and make sure you select the appropriate one. Go to Server, go to Network. And just like we changed the NAT, we're going to use the bridged and go OK. And it'll just take a second. As you can see, it's done. That's one thing I want you to do. The other thing is I want you to go back to the SQL Server 1, right click, open, change adapter settings, double click, properties, uncheck, check 4, properties, and now we want to join that domain. So we go use this, and remember the IP address that we want to allocate. Previously, remember, we allocated 50 to the domain controller, and this is going to be one more. So this is going to be 192. Let me look at the numlock here. 192.168.0.51. and subnet mask. Remember, our default gateway was 192.168.0.1. Our preferred DNS was 127.0.0.1. And the alternate is, now I want you to redirect this to the domain server or the controller so it can resolve the DNS. So 192.168.0.50. Oops, .50. And that will hopefully join the domain. So let me just repeat what I did here. This is a standalone server, and I'm about to join a domain. I'm going to give it an IP address, and the IP address next in sequence was 51. My default gateway was 192.168.0.1. And again, for the alternate DNS, I'm pointing it to the domain controller so it can resolve the DNS names. And DNS is basically resolving SQL.com for this IP address. Let's go OK, close, and close. And I'm going to restart. But if you can see here, I'm going to restart these services here. So I can go here, I believe. Or let me just go over here. Look at that for a second. And I'm just going to power this off. And we're going to restart it. And then hopefully when it comes back, it should have joined the SQL, or it will have the appropriate IP address it can resolve, and then we can join the domain. So let's see if we can do that in a second. So I'm going to power it off, power it on, right click, oops, or select it, start. Let's kill that. That's okay. Will take a few seconds. Because we changed the IP addresses, it's just taking a few seconds to resolve that. So these are the things that you have to be aware of when you're resolving the issues. Now this may take a few minutes here. So let's go to input, keyboard, and let's add in and password. And let's look at the IP address of this. Go OK. And now one thing I want you to note is this. Go to your, well, let's see, go to your server manager. Left click this icon right here. Give it a second. I just want to verify that the firewall is still turned off, because that's always problematic when you're trying to join a domain and it's turned back on. So go back to local server. So we want to verify this before we get long. And it's off, so that's good. So let's close this and open this. Right click, properties. Now if this doesn't work, I'll show you another way of doing it. Change domain SQL.com. Okay. Okay, let me look at the details here because the DNS doesn't exist here. So I'll see how we can do that, and I'll come back in a second and show you how do I resolve this. And we're back. I guess the only thing is it doesn't like the .com, so just press SQL and go OK. And type in the domain name. Remember, the computer name and domain changes. So it's SQL /administrator. Type in the password. Let's just double check. And if everything went well, we should have joined the domain. If not, we'll solve the problems. And that's part of the responsibility of DBA to resolve issues. That's what we get paid for, not necessarily doing the redundant things over and over again. It's when we have a problem, they look to us. So let's see if we join the domain. If not, then we may have to create what's called a domain user account and use that. But this does take a few seconds, so we may have joined it, and hopefully we can see a welcome sign. Still working. Okay, let me look at that, and I'll be back in a second. So it could be just the administrator password. And we're back, and as you can see, we've got that wonderful little pop-up that we wanted to see, which is welcome to the SQL domain. The issue, it seems, is that when you, as I mentioned, we need to start it. Let's go OK. Restart now. The issue is, as I mentioned, is when you're joining a domain and when you're allocating an IP address, you have to restart the services. Sometimes it takes, sometimes it doesn't. So you have to do it a couple of times if that happens. So again, if you're, the first thing I want you to do is provide the IP address to the NIC card. Once you've done that, restart your computer and restart the process again. And then you can join it. So now we're going to be a part of the SQL domain, and that's where we want to be. So as I mentioned, and then the other thing is I did look at my firewall. It was turned off, so that's a good thing, at least there. So now let's go back to device input, and let's just double check a few things. Now you'll notice here that this is a local here. The admin. What I want to do is actually join the SQL domain. So what you want to do is go over here and actually go other user. And in this case, in order to join a domain, you have to type in SQL to sign in SQL. So we can go admin administrator and password. Administrator and go join. And now this second server standalone is part of now the SQL server. And if I go here, you'll see that we can have SQL.com. So now we've joined the SQL server environment, or SQL domain, I should say. And that's what we want. So the next thing we're going to do now is, actually, let's just verify it. Open this. Right-click computer. Properties, and you can see now that we're part of the SQL domain. And a couple of things we want to make sure is that the firewall is still turned off. So let's just verify that. And one of the issues you're going to have as an SQL DBA is to resolve issues, as I mentioned. So never give up on a problem. That's the most important thing I can do, is give you that kind of encouragement. You'll feel a lot better about yourself once you resolve issues. But I understand you're learning, and that's fine. So if this is off, we're good. See, this is what I mean. It comes back on when you join the domain. So we want to deactivate this particular part here. So that's why you want to double check everything, and now we're okay. And you may want to even restart the services here. But at this point, we're good, and we can restart the services. So now we have two instances. One is the domain server, the domain controller, and one is the standalone server, which is now part of that domain, as we just verified. And now what we're going to do now next is install SQL Server on this instance, so we can start learning about SQL Server. And that's the whole point of these series of videos that we have done and we're going to do. So I think I'll leave it here and we'll continue. So remember the issue. If you're having an issue joining the domain, it's most likely the firewall is turned off. So go back to the firewall and turn it off and disable it. And or make sure you restart the services, reboot the services and the computer if you have to. So I think I'll leave it here and we'll continue the next one where I'm going to install SQL Server here. And I'm going to show you a property of virtual machine where you can actually share, do what's called shared folders. If I minimize this and click on this, you'll notice that initially I asked you to, let me go to downloads. Initially, when we downloaded our all our applications, they were downloaded to your document download folder on your local machine, not on the VM. So now the question becomes, how does this VM, this server 1 right here, how does this access this folder? And that's what I'm going to show you, how to set up a shared folder. So anything on your desktop can be viewable and shared on your VM. So that's the next thing. Let's just verify that's what we need to do, I believe. Well, we're going to install this first, but we need to do that. We need to do a share. So I think I'll leave it here and we'll continue with the next video. So my name is Raphael and this is how to become a production SQL database administrator. See you in the next video. Welcome to How to Become a Production SQL Database Administrator. My name is Raphael. We're now in the position to start installing SQL Server on our server that we created, Server 1. So let's see how to install SQL Server. One thing you'll note is that when we installed or downloaded the SQL Server 2014, we went to our downloads and we saw it as a ISO file, as you can see right here. Now, my operating system is a Windows 10 operating system. So if I go right click and open with, and I can use Power to Go, and that will allow me to extract the files from the ISO image. If you don't have Windows 10 or if you don't have an ISO extractor, then this is how you do it. And what I've done is, the first thing I did is I went to my drive C and I created a folder called SQL 2014. And then the next thing I did, and I'll give you this, is right here is the ISO extractor. So if you copy this and paste it to your website, you'll get this WinISO. Click on the download and you'll go through the process. Once you go through the process, you'll be able to extract the files. And let me show you how I did that, if we can get to that application. So let me look at that and let me control see where it is. So, whoops, let's go back here and let's see where it's installed. Now yours may vary, obviously, depending on where it is, but let's see how we got to that point. What is it called? It's new, Win. So open that and click on that. And this application will open. Now, you can register and buy it, but we just need to use it momentarily, so we'll go later. And what you need to do is go Open File and direct it to that Downloads folder. So as you can see, we've got two of them. We want the SQL 2014. Click on that and go Open. Here you will see the files within the ISO image. Just highlight that and we're going to go Extract. And now point yourself to that newly created folder called SQL, as we did in right here. So create that and direct yourself and go OK. As soon as you go OK, those files will instantaneously be extracted to that folder. So that's how you do that. Now, once we get that, notice that this is the SQL and everything has been extracted, and this is our setup file for SQL. But one thing you'll notice is that this file, this download file, is on my desktop. If I go to my SQL Server 1, how do I get that? How do I get that over here? And the way to do that is what's called sharing a folder. So I'm going to show you how to set up a shared folder so you can access. So let me minimize this. This right here is my desktop, and this is the virtual machine. And what we want to do is be able to access anything on my desktop from the virtual machine. So that's what we're trying to do. So the way to do that is as follows. Go to your manager, go to your server 1, go to your shared folder and left click it. This will pop up. Once you want to do that, what you want to do now is go to the plus sign. And we're just navigating to where that folder is on your host. So go Other, go to your C drive where I just created the extraction, and go to SQL, and then just click Select Folder. As soon as you click select Folder, you will be able to make it auto mount, and that's it, and go OK. Once you do that, you'll see it like this, and go OK. Once that is attached, you'll go back to your instance. And in this particular case, what you want to do is reboot your system. So I've already done it and reboot it. If after rebooting you don't see the network here, then what you want to do is go Device, Install Guest. Sometimes this re-adding the additions helps, but if you reboot it and you don't see it, then go to Device and Install, and then reboot again. Once you do that now, and if I double click this, you can see this is networked, and now I can see that file that's on my hard drive on my desktop here. So now I can start continue. We can actually copy this if you want, but that's fine. So I'm just going to go, now I'm going to install SQL Server on my instance. So go to Setup and go click. And this does take a few minutes to start up. Now, this is a great feature of SQL Server 2014, 2016. They've made it relatively easy to install. 2016 is a little more complicated than 2014, but nevertheless, it's relatively simple. So what we need to do is go to Installation, New SQL Standalone Server, and this wizard will start. And we're just going to follow the defaults. In a production environment, you'll have slight variations, but we can get to that later. This is an evaluation, so go Next. And accept the terms, and go Next. And let's show the details. We want everything to be green, so that's good. And go Next. Now, this does take a few minutes, so here I'm going to pause the video. And when this is complete, I'll come back and we can continue. So I'll just pause this video for a second, and I'll see you in a second. And we're back. I guess it didn't take that long. Sometimes it doesn't. So this is the next page. We're just going to go with the defaults. So select the SQL feature installation and go Next. Here's the options for selecting the features. Select all. Once you've selected all, what I want you to unselect is Reporting Services SharePoint, because we're not going to be doing anything with SharePoint. And over here, the rest we are, and analysis. We're not going to be doing anything in analysis. So let's do that. When we don't need anything, you don't need to activate it. So go Next. And again, leave everything for defaults. You'll see the prerequisites here. If there's a prerequisite missing, the SQL Server will indicate it, and you have to resolve those problems first. But most likely all our requisites are installed, so that's a good thing. And you can see that the package is missing. So we have to install that package before we can do that. So what I'm going to do now is go to the internet and install this package as .NET Frame 3.1 Service Pack, and we'll start. So let me see if we can do it through the, go over here, left click. Maybe the Server Manager, I believe, has it. So go to Local. Go to Dashboard, go to Add Roles and Features. Go to Next, 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 Next. And this is what it wants right here. So click on this. This will give us the .NETwork framework, and go Next. And install. Now this will take a few minutes to install. And what you want to do now is when you're back on the SQL Server here, this particular part, you don't have to necessarily go back and restart the process. If you're missing something, in this particular case, we're lucky enough that the operating system allows you to do this. Sometimes in the previous versions, this was a separate entity that you had to install. In this case, it's part of it. So what you'll have to do is just go rerun, and then this will become green. And that's what I'm hoping on. And hopefully this won't take that long so you can see it in action. So once that works, is installed, I'll just go rerun, and it will turn green and we can continue with the SQL. But this is a good important thing, is that if you need the requisites, these must be installed. Otherwise, as you can see, we can't proceed with the installation. So as I said previously, this was done manually, where you have to go to the internet and download this first. But in this particular case, with the newer version of operating system, it's already contained the .NET. So this may take a couple of seconds more, and if it doesn't, if it takes a few more minutes, then I'll pause the video and then we'll come back and rerun the SQL. This is probably the only problem you're going to get that I've seen when you don't have the prerequisites. Otherwise, it's a very smooth and easy installation of the defaults. So let's just give it a few more seconds and see what happens. If not, I'll pause it. I don't want to waste too much time of your time just waiting for this. So what I'm going to do now, let me just pause it, and as soon as this completes, which hopefully shouldn't be that long, we'll continue. And then I'll show you how we reran this. So I'll pause it and I'll see you in a second. And as you can see, the progress for the installation of .NET for it has been completed. So now if I go back to my SQL, all I have to do is, rather than restarting the whole system, is just go rerun, and that should pass, which it does, as you can see. So that's great. So we can close that and continue with the SQL installation. So here is the default name, which is MS SQL. And as I said, we're just going to accept the defaults and go next. And the installation of SQL in default is very easy also. So that's one of the great benefits of installing SQL Server. They've made it relatively easy compared to years ago when there was a lot more configuration is involved. So at this point, we'll just continue with the defaults and then we'll progress. The only thing I want you to do here is the SQL agent is manual. I want you to change it to automatic. The rest is fine, and we can go next. Add the current user, which is the administrator. Go next. We do want to install the SQL reporting services just in case we want to do that. And go next. Add the current user. Next. Next. And now we're ready to install, and we're done. So now all we're going to do, this is going to take about 15 minutes. So again, I'm going to pause this video, and then at the end we're going to see successful. And once everything is successfully installed, we'll just test it to verify the SQL can log on, and then we're good. Then we've also done this. So let's see where we are in our progress for each of these things. So the first thing we need to do is install the SQL server, and we're going to do that. Then the next thing we want to do is attach the database work, AdventureWorks 2012, so we can start doing a few of the functions of SQL. So you get an insight of what SQL Server is about, and we'll navigate to the SSMS, which is the Management Studio. So again, this is going to take a few minutes to install. And then when this is complete, I'll come back and we'll start that process again. So again, I'm going to stop this and pause it while this installs. And we're back, as you can see. So the SQL server was installed successfully, as you can see. This is what we're trying to get to. So let's just close that. And let's close that also. And let's just verify. So on your, let me get rid of that. And let me close that. So on your keyboard, press the window key. And now you'll see some icons that are related to SQL. So you can see SQL 14 here. If I right-click it, it allows you to pin it to taskbar, so do that. And right now, that's all I'm concerned about. You can do others, but that's the only thing I want to be worried about. Now let's go back to our desktop. And now we're going to start the SQL by clicking the icon. So there's SQL Server 14 and being installed. And it'll just take a few seconds. And then what we can do is just verify that the connectivity is fine and do a few select statements against the database. So while this is loading, let's go back to our Word and let's see what we've done. At this point now, we've installed SQL Server 2014. So the next thing I want to do now is actually attach a database, which is a sample database called AdventureWorks 2012-14. And this will have various tables that we can do some data against, analysis against. So let's do that. And as you can see, so let's just connect. This is the next screen you're going to get. And on the left-hand side, you'll see the connectivity to the SQL server. And if I expand the databases here, you can see all the databases that are relevant to this. Now here at this point, I don't have any what's called user-defined databases. So that's the next process, is to attach a database called AdventureWorks 2012, so I can actually do some select statements and update statements and show you how to demonstrate how to do that. So that's the next video that's going to be dedicated to this, installing the SQL AdventureWorks 2012. So I'm going to just leave it here now and continue with the next video for the AdventureWorks. So I'll see you in the next video. So my name is Raphael, and this is how to become a production SQL database administrator. See you in the next video. Welcome to how to become a production SQL database administrator. My name is Raphael. So in this video now, we've downloaded the AdventureWorks 2014 database, and now I'm going to attach it to the SQL Server 2014 now that I've installed it, so we have some data to work with. So let's see how you do that. You'll notice here on my desktop, as we mentioned earlier, when we downloaded the original, we have the AdventureWorks 2014 database. So what we need to do now is get that database to the VM right here. And as you know, we can do that a couple of ways. One is through a shared folder. So if I go back to my server here, and if I click on this shared drive, you can see that I've got SQL Server. So all we need to do is just dump it here from our database, and we'll review it. So let's see how you do that. So what we need to do is go back to your desktop and right click and copy it. And let's go back to our C drive, back to our SQL 14. That's the folder that's being viewed. And then just right click and let's just paste it here. And at the same time, before we do that, you'll notice that it's a zip, so we have to extract it. So right click, let's say extract all. And we want it to be extract. Where do we want to extract it to? We want it to extract it in this folder, so just go OK. And you'll see that it's extracted right here. So now that we can view it in this directory. So let's go back to our virtual environment right here. And if I refresh it, you can see that I've got the database here zipped and then the database here, extracted here. So everything now that is being shared here will automatically be shared by your virtual machine. So here it is. So what we want to do actually is double click this. This is what's called a backup copy of a AdventureWorks 2014. So what I want to do is actually, let's just copy that and let's put it on my C drive, make a folder here, just call it backup, and I'll just dump it here. And then we can navigate to this. Let's paste it here. And that's the AdventureWorks. So actually we have to restore what's called a restoring database. So in order to get that, go back to your SQL. On your databases, right click, restore database. And now what we're going to do is navigate to that screen. So go device, and let's go to the ellipsis, add. And all I'm doing is directing myself to that backup folder that we've got on the C drive. And there it is. And just go click on this, go OK, OK, and then go OK. And this should just take a few seconds because it's a very, very small database. As you can see right here, there we go. And now if I go to my databases here, you can see that I've restored the database AdventureWorks 2014. And if I expand it, this is where all the data, if you will, resides. And these are all the tables that are related to that SQL server. So if I go right click, select top 100 or 1,000, I should say, you'll get all the data that's relevant to that particular table. In this case, 290 rows. So that's great. So let's go back to our AdventureWorks. So we've done this now. So actually, I'm going to continue with this. So I'll do a few more. Let me look at the time for a sample, and that's fine. So I'm going to actually do a few more things. So this is the environment that a SQL database administrator works in. Once you're familiar with this, you'll feel extremely comfortable in doing your job. So when you sit down on your front desk in your office, this is what you're going to be seeing. It's not going to be anything different than this. And the reason I'm mentioning is that because a lot of students have some fears of looking at interfaces that may be different that they've been working with. And it's not until you get into the actual job and actually sit in front of your computer and double click the icon for an SQL server and start looking at this and allaying your fears, because you go, hey, this is exactly what Raphael taught me, and that's true. So this is exactly what I see when I'm sitting down and I have to work with databases. So let's look at a few statements here. Let's look at a few things we can do. What a database did. One of the most important things that a database administrator does is called backing up a database. Basically, I'm making a copy of it. If you'll notice here right now, I actually restored the database from a backup. So actually, let me look at this. Let me close this. Let me right click, and I'm going to actually delete this entire database. Now, in a production environment, you would never do this unless there's a reason to, but I'm actually going to delete this entire database. So there you go, and I'm going to go OK, and that database has been deleted, and it's gone, and all the information, all the relevant data has been gone. So this is a very critical thing that the database does. But the great thing is that because a DBA has what's called backups on a regular schedule, he can restore that database up to the point and with very little data. So we already know that we already had a backup of that because that's how we restored it. So now that I've deleted it, how'd you get that VentureWorks back if you had to? Well, the database administrator would do this: right click, restore, and again, he would do exactly what we just did a second ago. He would go back to his original backup copies of the data, and he would restore it. So now we don't lose any data. As long as we have a backup of the most current data, and I show you that in the videos, then we're good. So here we go and back. And if we expand that, we can see all the tables and so on. So that's a great advantage also. So now that we've done the backup of a database, what is TSQL? Well, T stands for Transact SQL. Transact SQL stands for Structured Query Language. And what TSQL is the short version, or SQL, is what the language does is primarily used for database languages such as SQL. Oracle uses it, MySQL uses it, and other databases use it, like Access also. And basically, it's a language that allows you to manipulate every aspect of SQL. So let's look at some of these right now. So the first one that I was going to give you a demonstration of was the select statement. So let's say you have data now in this database, and let's expand the tables, and we're going to do a simple select statement. A simple select statement its primary purpose is to view the data. So for example, let's see what's the data in person address or person business or whatever. What you would do is up here on the left, create a new query. This is the pane where you would write your T-SQL language commands. So in order for me to view data of any of these tables, I would use the select command. And it is select. Since I want all the data, I would go asterisk, and then from, and then the table that I want to extract the data from or view the data. So let's say in this case, I want to view the data of human resources. I can just drag, and that's it. As soon as I execute, I get all the relevant data, 16 rows, for that particular statement. So this is basically how you use a select statement, is to view any data. So let's make another one. So now I'm going to do a little copy paste. I don't want to use this table, obviously, so I can write it. Now, obviously, you saw me drag the table, or I can actually just write it. So I can write person dot, and you'll see what's called the IntelliSense that allows you to make typing a little less easier. So for now, if I highlight this and execute, I've got all the data relevant to that. And you can see there's almost 20,000 rows for the person. And these are all the data. So I'll leave that here. So that's what's called a select statement. It allows you to do. What about what's called the where clause? The where clause, its primary purpose is just to filter the data. In database administration, as you can see, when I did this, I've got almost 20,000 rows. Well, in a production environment, you don't want 20,000 rows. You just want specified rows that the end user wants. So this asterisk here specifically says, give me every single row and every single column. These are columns. and these are rows. So as you can see, we're getting 20,000 columns. So let's use the where clause. So in this case, I just want all the data that's relevant to, let's say, the last name of Duffy. So I would want all the data, so I just want this one line, and that is where the where clause would come in. The where clause would be as follows. So you say, give me every single data from that table, where, and then you say last name. And as I said, the IntelliSense allows you to do that. Equals, since it's a text, we have to have it in quotes. And now just Duffy. And now you'll notice that when I did this without the where clause, as I said, I've got 20,000 rows. If you want to filter the database, you use the where clause. In this case, I'm saying, give me everything from this table where the last name equals Duffy. So if I have more than one last name of Duffy, then I should get relevant rows. Highlight, execute. And as you can see, I do have more than one Duffy. So now I've got the where clause. So that's great. So let's move on. What is the update statement? The update statement is just what it says. It updates a specific item or a specific column or a specific row or whatever the data you validate. So for example, in this particular case, you can see that, let's look at this one here. So highlight it and execute. You'll notice that department ID 1 has the engineering name and research development. Suppose you want to change that to update to reflect something else. This is where the update statement would come in. So the update statement is as follows. You say update the table name, in this case, department. I'm just going to copy that rather than writing it. So update that table, which is this table. Then you say set. And what do I want to do? I want to set the column name. So I say name, column name, equals to what do I want to set it to? So I want to set that to, let's take the sales and make it caps. So I'll put it in quotations, it's text. And now you can see that. Now, this basic update statement is basically saying, go to this table, which is this table right here, and where you find the column name, and then wherever you see the word sales, change it to capital. If I executed this update statement now, everything would be capital S because I've not put a filter on it. So when you're doing an update statement, it's very, very crucial, I should say, that you put a where clause. So only updates this particular cell rather than everything. So I would have to say where name equal say, oops, now I'm going to do sales. So now if I go, now it's going to go to this table, and anytime it finds the word sales, it's going to do it uppercase. So let's see if that's the case. And if I execute it, we're good. One row affected. And let's look at that. And now you'll see that that has been updated. So that's what the primary purpose of an update is, to take existing data and manipulate it to whatever you want. So that's great. But the important thing is make sure you have a where clause. Let's see if I didn't do that. Let's say, for example, if I didn't put the where clause, let's say execute it, and oops, can't do it because it's an index. That's fine. Don't worry about that. And let's look at that. I don't want to get into indexes here, but as you can see, if I didn't do it, this would be entirely, or everything would be capital S's. So this is important to do this. Let's move on. What about the delete statement? Well, the delete statement actually, as the name suggests, deletes certain things. So let's say we want to delete something now. For example, let's say we want to delete this entire table. So I would go right-click, delete, and this will pop up. And if I actually do the script, I can actually see the script that actually is going to be doing this. So now the drop statement is, which is comparable to delete statement, it's going to actually drop this entire table. So if I execute this and execute it, it's a foreign key, so I can't do that either. So that's not good. Let's look at a delete statement. Let's look at delete this statement here. So delete this. Oops, let's copy that properly. Copy. So what I'm going to do now is go to that table and delete that. Where I need the where clause, department ID equals 2. And let's see what happens here. Oh, I'm sorry, 3. Or it could be, doesn't matter, it's 3 or 2. And if I highlight this and execute it, okay, these are reference keys. So let me find a table that doesn't have what's called reference keys. You can't drop or something with the key. So if it's got a, like this primary key, you can't drop it. But the whole purpose is that you can allow you to drop certain things using the delete statement. And I don't know which ones they are. Most of these tables here are. So actually what I'm going to show you next is one more thing here. Joins. The primary purpose of joins is to join 2 or more tables. It's very rare that you do a select statement or update statements or delete statements against just a single table. In a production environment, most tables are related and you use what's called a join. So let's see if we can do that. And let's create a new query. And I'm going to just show you actually what a query join looks like rather than manipulating it. So we can do the, actually let's look at the employee. Now these are all the tables, as you can see, related to that. So let's see what we can choose here. It doesn't really matter. Let me actually just go back to sales. I can do sales details, sales header, and that's it. Now here you can see that this is what's called a relationship, and it's an inner join. And basically it's taking data, joining it, and now I can say, hey, give me the order quantity, product ID, unit price of that particular table, and it can give me the status and account number or whatever I choose here. But this is what's called a join. And if I execute this, it's basically giving me the result set of both those 2 tables using what's called a join. So again, you can see this data here is 121,000 rows. So that's what a purpose of a join is to join 2 tables. So and that's about it. That's all I really want to talk about in the SQL environment. Now obviously there's a tremendous amount of more that a DBA does, but this will give you a synopsis of what the responsibilities are, which are huge. But this is a very rewarding profession, both financially and personally for me. So I truly love my job. And I think this will give you a taste of what now the SQL environment does. And we'll continue with the next one where I'll show you, if you want to pursue this kind of a career and what it entails, what are the requisite courses and so on that you need. So let's see what we're going to do next after this. So I'm going to use a clipboard to copy paste, full screen capture, and address. We've already shown you how to access a shared folder. And what I mean by that is what you noticed here is when you have a folder on your desktop and you want to be able to view it in your virtual machine, and then you use a share. So we've gone over that before. And a couple of things I want to show you about just using the clipboard. And I think I'll show you that now, maybe in the next video. So I think I'll leave it here now. So now you get an idea of what an SQL DBA does. Although really this, I shouldn't say what it really shows you, because this is very, very tip of the iceberg. But at this point, what you should be able to do is understand and navigate through this interface. This is what I want you to show. This is where I do all my work, and this is where you will do your work. It's nothing dissimilar here. And again, there's a tremendous amount of securities that we take care of, replication, always on, and so on. So there's a tremendous amount of data to learn. So I think I'll leave it here, and we'll continue with the next one where I'll show you just a few hints about the VM and its properties. So I hope you're learning a lot here, and if you are, then we'll continue with the next video where I'll show you how to get all this stuff and get more relevant data. So my name is Raphael, and this is how to become a production SQL data administrator. See you in the next video. Welcome to How to Become a Production SQL Database Administrator. My name is Raphael. In this tutorial now, I'm going to illustrate to you how do DBAs migrate data from one database to another, either through a wizard or through a job. And in this particular example, I'm going to show you how to do it through a wizard. A couple of things I want you to point out before I even start. If you look at here, we're in the VirtualBox Manager, and this Windows OS was the domain, and this was the server. And as you can see at this point, they're powered off. It's critical to know that when you're working with the SQL Server 1 here, this is obviously powered off. Make sure that the Windows operating system is powered on also. Since this is a domain and this is part of a domain, this registers all of its properties. So if this is inactive or inoperable or not powered on, then this will not power on. So make sure you do that. So let's make sure we click on this and go Start. And let's see, make sure the Windows operating system with the domain controller is always on. So let's just do that right now. And it's restoring. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. So we understand if you have any problems, you'll free. So as you can see now, this is active. And there we go. Now we can minimize this. And now click on the SQL or the server with the SQL server on it. And let's power it up. And from here, I'm going to illustrate to you how you can migrate data from one database to another. And this is one of the tasks that you will be doing. Most likely these tasks are done by what I call SSI packages, and I'll be illustrating a couple of other things in a few examples, and then we'll wrap it up. So hopefully this will give you an idea of what to expect when and if you want to get into this kind of a career or this kind of learning. So let me start this server 1 and we'll continue. So as I said, that's why it's important to make sure that the Windows domain server is always on. Otherwise, you're going to get an error. So if you see an error and you can't log on, that could be one of the reasons. So while this is applying, let's look at it, and I'll show you in a second. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to work with the AdventureWorks 2014 database. And there's various tables in there. I'm going to show you how to migrate whatever table we select from one source to a destination. Now, the destination can be an existing database or an SQL database. It can be a different kind of a database, what's called a heterogeneous database, such as an Oracle or Access or other database. Or you can migrate data to send the data to an Excel file or a CSV file. So I'll show you that in a second. So let's get logged on first, and remember we're on this. Remember our password, and there we go. And so the first thing we need to do obviously is log on to the SQL server. So double click this, and let's start with 2014. Now, this is something you will be doing on a frequent basis, but most likely anything you do on a frequent basis, you want to try to automate. And all the courses that I'll be discussing in the upcoming videos will illustrate that point, how to automate and make up what's called jobs. So let's connect to our database here, and let's see what we can do. So here is the database here that we've been working for, AdventureWorks 2014. And if I expand this and expand the tables, these, as you know, are the tables that we can work with. So let's look at this now. As you can see, the only user-defined database that I have is called AdventureWorks 2014. So what I'm going to do right now is actually create another database so we can send some of the data from here, the source, to the destination. So I'm just going to quickly right-click, Database, and I'm just going to call this dev, and then just go, and I'll accept all these defaults, but I do explain these in the upcoming videos with the full course. So here it is. Now if I expand the table, you'll see that I don't have any tables populated yet. So what I want to do now is take a few tables from the AdventureWorks 2014 and migrate them here. So how can I do that? And the easiest way to doing it is use the wizard. So right click, tasks, export. So we're going to be exporting data from the source, and this wizard will pop up. Go next, and the first thing we want to do is connect to the data source. And what we want to do, obviously, there's different sources, as you can see. There's flat file, access, Excel, and so on. What we want to do is scroll down, select native, and the population, the server name will be populated along with the database source. Go next. Now, where's the destination? The destination is same SQL server. And in this particular case, what I want to do actually is go right-click here, Properties. What I want to do is look at the server name and copy-paste it there. The reason is it'll be easier to connect to. Once I do that, I can do the drop-down list for all the databases that exist and select Dev. So now this is the destination database. So I'm going to go next. Now here it allows you to copy data from one table to another, or actually you can write a query if you want. If I did that, this would be where I would insert the query or the SQL query where I want, which would be the select statement. In this particular case, I'm actually going to copy data from one source to another. So I'm going to go next. Here you'll notice that this is the source, and these are all the tables that are related with these AdventureWorks 2012. Now here, just by selecting the checkbox, I can select the various tables that I want to import. So let's say look at all the employees, human resources, let's say. And that's it. And as you can see, these are the destination. If I click on Edit Mapping, that will pop up, and that's just giving you information about each individual table and its data types. Now we can go over that later. You can preview it, but that's okay. Now that we've got this selected, of course, you can select whatever table you want. So these are the tables that we want to migrate from the source to the destination. If I go next, and we want to run it immediately, you can save it as an SSI package, but we'll talk about that later. And go next and finish. And this will give you a summary of what's about to be done. As soon as you press finish, you'll see this. Now, there's not very much data here, so it should just take a few seconds. As you can see, it's done and it's successful. If we close that and go to our dev database and go to tables, and if I refresh it with this button here, or F5, you can see that all the human resources tables have been migrated from the source to the destination. And you can even push this to a CSV file if you wish. So let's quickly look at that. If we wanted to push one of these to a CSV file or an Excel sheet, we can even do that. So since I don't have Excel populated in here, I'm going to push it to a CSV file. So the process is the same. I'm going to export the data from the source database. And the hardest part about this is just selecting, make sure you select the appropriate data source. So in this case, it's SQL. And that's the dev database, which I want the source information from. And now I'm going to go to the destination. So in this case, I want a CSV file, also known as flat file destination. As soon as you do that, it's going to ask me where I want to dump it. So I'm going to go browse, and I'm going to go to my C drive. We'll just call it here test, and go open, and that's it. And obviously, as you can see, if the columns have names, leave this checked. And we'll go next, 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 and next, and then just finish. And that's 16 transfers. So if I close this now, and if I go to my C drive, which is this folder here, and go to C drive, you can see that I've got that data in a text file, and there we go. So that's one of the easiest way of doing this. And as I said, now I'm doing this in what's obviously referred to as manually, meaning physically I'm doing it. But in a real production environment, if you have migration of data from source to destination, you use what's called jobs. And I'll be illustrating that in the videos that we have for these courses. So that's something I wanted to point out. So the next example I'm going to show you is, well, all this data is wonderful. And so all this data, it's important to know that all this data that we have here at this moment is just raw data. It's useless information at this until we kind of configure it, design it, and deploy it to the end user or the upper manager where they can make decisions upon it. When they start making decisions upon this data, then it becomes information. And that's what we're trying to do. Translate this raw data into information that's usable by users, the end user, or the upper management. And then this is becomes. Now, how do you do that? One of the ways you can do that, of course, is utilization of reports. So in the next demonstration, I'm going to show you how we actually utilize what's called SSRS, or reporting services, where we push this data to a report, and then the end user or the upper management can view that data. So I'll start with that one here. So I think I'll leave this here. This was just an illustration of how to migrate data from one point to another, and there's other ways to doing it. So I'll leave it here and we'll continue with the next video. So my name is Raphael, and this is how to become a production SQL database administrator. See you in the next video. Welcome to how to become a production SQL database administrator. My name is Raphael. One of the responsibilities of the database administrator is the integrity of the data. And one of the things that the DBA needs to be conscious of is a rough estimation of how much data is in per table. Now, there are various reports that he can generate and write complicated scripts to get that. But the other way to do it is as following. So if we go to our database here and expand it, and then go to our AdventureWorks 2014 and right-click, Reports, Standard Reports, and here are all the options of reports that he can get. Disk usage by top tables, disk usage by tables, partition, blocking, and so on. So as I select one of these options, it'll give me a report that allows you to view it. So let's, for example, this is one we want to use, is disk usage by top tables. So if I open that, it generates a very quick and very informative report that I can visually quickly look at and determine how many records are per table. And as you can see, the sales order detail is 121,000 records, which is a very small amount of number, but at least in a very large database, if I just want a quick snapshot of how much data is being utilized or how much is being updated, if I've also got a snapshot of this from prior days, then I can do a comparison. If I right click here, you can export the data to an Excel. So if I'm doing some analysis for weekly or monthly or even daily analysis of what is the growth rate of, let's say, how many records are being imported for sales order detail from day 1 to day 2 or week 1 to week 2 and so on, then this is a quick way I can do that, and I can do some quick analysis on the Excel sheet itself. So this is one of the quick ways that I would encourage you to look at the data and be conscious of, at least briefly, of how much data is in per table. Because as the data gets larger, we're going to have to start utilizing other SQL techniques to manage that large amounts of data. Again, this is very, very small, but this just gives you an illustration of how the DBA can view the content of a database and its reports, or its tables, I should say, through this report. And as you can see, it's a very, very, very tiny, comparatively speaking, database, so it's hardly anything, and then it gives you the reserves room. And the fact that you can import it is a great tool also. A couple other things now while we're here. I want to really close this. I don't want to really go beyond this. Let's just look at some of the navigational tools here. Here, as you can see, that these are all the databases. If I expand that, you'll see a folder called System Databases. And if I expand that, you'll see the 4 databases called Master, Model, MSDB, and Temp databases. When you install SQL Server, whether it's in Express Edition right through Enterprise Edition, you always get these system databases. These are mandatory and they're essential for the SQL to serve in a nutshell. And let's collapse that. Here, obviously, these are called, anytime you create a database, that is referred to as what's called a user-defined databases, and you must make up backups of not only of this but also the system databases, especially the master. Well, I say especially, but especially the master, the MSDB. These must be backed up as they have critical data that's relevant to SQL. So this is a user-defined table, and this should be backed up here. You'll notice we have 2 databases called Report Server and Report Server Temp database. This particular databases are only installed if at the time of installation of SQL Server you've opted for installing of reporting services. This is the only time you'll see it. If you don't, you won't see those. Let's continue with here. Here obviously is the security. So security, obviously, as you gathered, is essential for SQL administration and for the responsibility of job. So here you can create what are called logins, or SQL logins. If I expand that, you'll see these are the logins. Now, in order for you to access, or a user to access SQL Server itself, you must create a login. So this is where it starts. Roles are basically groups of logins, and so these are server roles. These are by default server roles. If I click on System Admin, This is what was called system admin. It's called the SA account, and this particular role has what's called godlike powers, meaning if you're a part of this particular role or group, then you can control every single aspect of SQL management. So you want to be aware of that. You can, of course, so I'll continue with that. And then again, we've got these various tabs that we can look at. Replication. Replication is a part of the SQL where you literally replicate data from one source to another. So we've gone over that, and we will go over that in the upcoming videos that I will be showing to you. This is one of the greater features that we have, so I'll be discussing that. And lastly, what I want to just quickly look at is SQL agent and SQL jobs. One of the responsibilities of a DBA is to ensure that anything that can be automated should be automated. And if he wants to do that, and an example would be a backup of this database. If I want a set schedule to back this data up on a daily basis or weekly basis or monthly basis, I'm not going to go in there and go right click, task, and backup, and then continue with this window and go okay. I'm not going to do it manually. What I'm going to do is actually I'm going to go to the server agent under jobs, and I'm going to go right click, new job, and then I'm going to write the various steps here. Where's the code? Well, actually here. So I would write the code here that will allow me to back any of the databases or the system databases. And then actually, once we have done that, what we'll be able to do is set a schedule. And this is what the jobs do, allow you to do. It allows you to run a particular job and execute on a scheduled, timely basis. So then once I've created a job to back up system databases or user-defined databases, then it will run continuously, and I don't have to do that. So one of the great responsibilities and great things that a DBA does or tries to do is make sure anything that can be automated, whatever that responsibility is done through a job. And we certainly do that. It becomes a lot easier and a lot less tedious of creating new job, creating backup plans and so on. So anytime you can automate a process in the SQL environment, we utilize what's called the SQL Server Agent and jobs. And then you have some various alerts that you can create, operators, and look at the error logs of this SQL server. So if you have any issues, this is where you would address them. So this is just what I wanted to show you about their reports. And there are other facets and responsibilities that a DBA does, and there's a tremendous amount. And again, I've been in the upcoming videos, I'll show you all the courses that you need to actually get a full-fledged, in-depth education about SQL administration. And I think I went over that in the previous video. So you can look at previous video or the upcoming videos also. So you can look at that and look at the list of SQL courses that I've done that will allow you to manage this entire environment in many, many aspects. So again, so I just wanted to quickly introduce you to this report and introduce you to this GUI, which is GUI Graphical User Interface. And this is how we DBAs manage the database administration. So I think I'll leave it there and we'll continue with the next series. So my name is Raphael, and this is how to become a production SQL database administrator. Bye. Welcome to How to Become a Production SQL Database Administrator. My name is Raphael. In the previous video, we were looking at the update statement and the delete statement, and we got into a snag because of what's called a foreign key and primary key. And I wasn't able to demonstrate to you the update statement or the consequences of doing an update statement without the where clause, and the consequences of doing a delete statement without the where clause. So I want to kind of repeat that so you have an idea, so it's not left in the limbo here. Here, as you can see, if I do the execute this is the table that we were working with. And what I was trying to illustrate to you is that if you did an update statement for that table and setting sales name in that column called name to sales, and if you executed this without using a where clause, then everything would be updated to sales. And then we got into this little problem here. Same thing with the delete statement. So basically, I want to correct that right now and show you how it works. Now, you would not do this in a production environment, but again, this shows you how you can manipulate data also. So what I'm going to do a couple of things here is I'm going to go here, design, and basically it's got a what's called a foreign key. So I'm going to actually just remove that key. You would not do this in a production environment. So take a note of that, but that's the reason it's causing it. So I'm going to do that. And the other thing is I'm going to remove what's called the indexing. And again, Let me remove this. Let's delete that. And actually delete this also. We don't need it. Or actually, we can't even do it because it's already done. So now, if you'll notice here that if I refresh this, the key is gone. So now if I select this, we can still do a select statement. And now to illustrate the point of updating without a where clause. So ordinarily, I told you when you do an update, you must use the where clause, or otherwise everything here will get updated to whatever you're updating. So if I do run the update statement now and execute it and look at the select statement, you'll notice that everything here is being updated still. And this is garbage, what's called garbage data now, and it can't be used. So you'll have to restore the database from the back, or restore a specific table if you've got that. So this is very important that you use a where clause. So now, what about the delete? The delete statement is as important as the update statement, that you have to have a where clause. If I executed this, then everything here would be deleted. But we only want to delete specified data. So in this particular case, I'm giving an example of saying, go to this table, go to this group name column, and wherever you see research and development, I want you to delete it, because that's what the where clause does. So now if I execute this, remember we've got 16 rows, research and development. If I execute this, we've got 3 rows affected. So now if I highlight this, we should have 13, which we do. So anything with group name research and development has been deleted. So I just wanted to point that out, not to leave it in limbo as we did previously. Now, obviously here, what would you do if you had this thing? You would have to actually restore the database again. So actually, let me do that. So someone makes an error of doing this, and you shouldn't be able to do it because again, in terms of SQL management, you would have securities allowing a user to do certain things, and it's controlled exactly by you as a DBA, which would prevent him to do that. But let's say even you did it by accident, and now you want to restore the database. So what you would do actually is restore the database. You can go right-click, restore the database. And remember, we already have a database backup of the most current backups. And while I don't want to get into the backup and procedures, suffice to say we have a copy at this point of the original, and go OK. And at this point I would go here, options, and overwrite, or what's called replace. And as soon as I do this, you'll see that it's updating here and it's restoring a database. So it'll just take a few seconds to restore the database, and if everything, it may not, because I've got it opened actually. When you have a script against a database, it will not do it. So that's why it takes too long. So let me close that, or close it, and see, that's what it's doing. So actually we need to be out of it now. So let's close it. Now you're in the database. So you can't be in the database when you're restoring a database. Or you could do the other way. So let's actually, let's do this. Let's delete this database. Make it left and close all the connections, because there was a connection, and now we don't have it. So remember, the department table had all sales. I'm going to restore the database. This is exactly the same thing we did from the start, is to restore a data. As long as you have a fully backup database of the most current data, you can always go back. And this is something critical in a DBA job, and we'll be discussing this more in depth in the courses. So now if I go back here and department and do the top 10,000, you'll notice that we're back to the original state we were. So I just wanted to point that out and not leave it, as I said, in limbo, so you have an understanding of updated state. The other thing I want to point out here now is, if you'll notice here, if I minimize this, and if I go to Window R and go Notepad, let's say I've got, and I'm going to actually minimize this and bring it here. There are a lot of times, as you know, this is your VM, as you know. There are a lot of times when you're going to need to bring in data from your desktop to laptop of your VM. For example, if I click on this, and this is some data that I've gotten here. Suppose I want to copy this and paste it here. If I do that, I can't do it. I've only got the most current clipboard here. So how do you resolve the clipboard that you can copy paste from your desktop? There's a lot of times you want to actually copy some text from here to here. How can you do that? Well, the way you do that is as follows. On your manager, go to your manager or VM, select the appropriate virtual machine, go to General, go to Advanced, and here you can see shared clipboard. It's disabled by default, so we want to go bi-directional, meaning you can do it either way. Drag and drop apparently doesn't work for Windows, so that's fine. So now that we can do that, so remember I couldn't do it if I pasted, I got something that was originally in that clipboard. Now if I go to my desktop, copy, and right click and paste, you'll notice it does allow you to copy. So that's a great feature to have in order for you to copy paste from your source, your host, to your virtual machine. So I think that's a great thing to know. So make sure you actually do that. You'll find it's extremely beneficial to you. So I think I'll leave it here. The next video I'm going to just wrap it up. I think I've covered everything I wanted to do. This particular document, the ultimate guide in becoming an SQL DBA, will be provided for you, and with all these and all these videos. And I think I've covered. And now obviously you're going to have all these links to download all the free and trial basis data. So I think I've given you everything. One thing I do want to do repeat here, since I am going to close this. As I mentioned, if you go to udemy.com and type in Raf 𝐼𝐥𝐿, you can see all my courses here. Let me just pause this for a second because there's a couple things I don't want to see. And actually, here it is. So if you go to the Raf Academy and type in Raf 𝐼𝐥𝐿, you can see all my courses that allow you to become a database administrator. So get all the SQL administration full courses, in-depth courses to become an SQL. Take them in this order. Now, the order is important also, to take them in this order. They're designed specifically to be taken. If you would decide to take all of them, take Learn T-SQL first, then SQL Admission Part 1, 2, and 3, followed by Reporting Services Part 1, then followed by Integration, then followed by Reporting Part 2. And these two I'm still in the process of making, but you don't need to worry about those yet. And that's fine. If you do need coupons, which are $15 a piece, or if you have any issues, then you can email me, or you can use an instant message on Udemy to contact me, and I'll be more than happy to help you. Now, take note that this is just a evaluation, so if you want to rate it, that's fine. But I would highly recommend that you rate the actual courses rather than this free course that I'm providing for you. But I think to wrap it up, I think this will give you a quick introduction of what is necessary to becoming a production SQL database administrator. So I'll just leave it here, and we'll continue with the upcoming videos. So my name is Raphael, and this is how to become a production SQL database administrator. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye.